Welcome back to Ivy Unleashed. Today, Brooke and I are so excited to get into questions. We just want to get right to the point in this episode. We have Dr. Jessie Hehmeyer here. Welcome to Ivy Unleashed.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you so much, Brooke. It's such a pleasure to join you in your community.
Yes, we love it. And for the first thing we have to unpack are these credentials because, wow, okay, we have a Master of Science in Human Nutrition and Functional Medicine, a doctorate in chiropractic medicine, a IFM certified practitioner, certified nutrition specialist, and back in the day, a yoga instructor and a trainer. Okay, so
this girl knows her stuff.
We could ask you anything, and we have a lot of questions for you. It's really exciting.
Well, as you can see, fundamentally, it's like, as you spoke, I was like going through my career journey, right? But really, ultimately, what it has all been is born out of a devotion to make a difference with people in the area of health, right? When people are thriving, they're able to bring their best, to feel their best, look their best, and be their best. And to me, that's what it's all about. And so, like you and your listeners, I am a learner. So it's always like, okay, what else is there for me to learn such that I can make a difference?
I love that. We're both learners too. And sometimes it's hard when you have a lot of information in your brain and you're trying to create a business. And so we want to start out kind of asking you about how you've taken all of this education and you created your business well empowered. How have you kind of taken everything you've learned and tangibly put it into a business to serve people and help them thrive?
That is such a great question. Well, so what I would say is over the years, a number of different things. First of all, I discovered early on in working with people in different facets of health that we don't buy what we do, we buy why we do it, right? So the what itself is sometimes it's compelling and sometimes it's not, right? But the why is really what makes the difference in our journey. So that coupled with getting data, like really being able to understand the source of someone's health symptoms or conundrums, ultimately over the course of decades, I brought that all together to manifest in Well Empowered, right? So when I work with people, I take a data-driven, heart-centered approach. And we're engaging in root cause healing, right? And stepping into a whole new era. And that really does require full engagement of heart and of mind.
I love that. We talk a lot about natural healing, and that is the name of your game. So I want to know how you chose natural healing.
Yeah, so it's so funny. I have 3 brothers, only girl, and 2 of them are MDs. So clearly I'm not anti, right? But for me, I just really saw, first of all, the difference that natural healing made in my life. And I really overall, just like a huge need for people to be able to address the root cause of their health symptoms or conundrums, because while traditional medicine absolutely has its place, it really struggles to adequately guide people in certain key areas. Chronic health conditions, whether it's around weight or around digestion or, skin struggles or hormones gone wackadoodle, right? Like if it's not a quote unquote disease state, there's not typically a whole lot of solutions inside of traditional medicine. And it's also not an approach that is working proactively, right? Looking at labs and saying, oh, if we take these numbers and extrapolate out 10 years, it's not going to look pretty. It's more just like, oh yeah, no, this is a little out of range, but you're okay, right? That's kind of the approach. So for me, it's really my love of the body. First of all, it's magical what it can do, and being able to come in there and understand what's at the source of symptoms or health conundrums, and then facilitate its natural healing abilities. That really just, to me, it's my job feels like magic on a day-to-day basis, even though I know the science behind it. It's still like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah, you're not giving people a Band-Aid, right? You're thinking of them long-term. You want them to thrive. And like, if you just prescribe something and you don't think long-term, they're going to be back in your office with the same things. And something that we've talked a lot about on this podcast and that Brooke coaches people on is gut health. And so something we haven't talked in depth about though is the microbiome. And with Western medicine, that's a big gap. Like when you go into your doctor's office, they're not talking to you about your gut health unless if you go to a functional practitioner or something like that. So we really want to talk about the microbiome, and we haven't really touched on this at a basic level. And so we would love for you just to kind of explain what is the microbiome and how does it affect our metabolism and our health?
Yeah, awesome question, Andrea. So your microbiome is made up of the bugs that live in you and on you, right? So the bugs that live in you and on you, the majority of your microbiome is housed in your large intestines. A little fun fact, large intestines and colon, same thing, two different ways of saying it. So I always think these little fun facts are good to know, right? But the majority of your microbiome lives in your large intestines, and the majority of the bugs we're talking about are bacteria. However, your microbiome likely includes some viruses, and for some people, it could include some yeast, which are a type of fungus. It could include some parasites, right? So your microbiome collectively, these bugs that live in you and on you, the majority of which are in your large intestines.
And why is it important to have a healthy microbiome? And also what does that look like? How do we know if it is healthy? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So there are certain bacteria that have been shown to be beneficial, right? And by beneficial, I mean they play a role in our immune system. They play a role in our production of certain nutrients. They're anti-inflammatory. They help fight bad bugs, right? They do so many different things. So these are the variety of these good bacteria. These are the ones we want living in us. Now, what happens when either there are less of those and more of quote unquote bad bacteria, or too much yeast or a parasite, right? These symptoms of a disruption of the microbiome can be varied, right? A lot of people think, well, my digestion would be out of whack. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes that is how it shows up. But a disruption of the microbiome can also show up in someone's mood, whether it's being excessively anxious or feeling more depressed or even struggling to focus. Your microbiome does play a role in your production of neurotransmitters. So it can absolutely affect your mental health and well-being. A disruption of your microbiome might show up in your skin. It could show up in, making an autoimmune condition either kind of appear, not to say it wouldn't appear otherwise, but it's kind of like the final straw on the camel's back sort of thing, or it can make an autoimmune condition a little bit worse, right? Other ways it can show up, a disruption of your microbiome can show up is in challenges with weight. And there's some really good information on how your microbiome affects your metabolism and the number you see on the scale as well.
We want to get into that too, because that is so interesting. The people that are in our community, they love hearing about metabolism. They want to burn more calories at rest. I mean, who doesn't? And feel their best. They want to look their best. And a lot of times weight's a part of that. In our business, that is not a focus. We'd really like to focus on making the scale irrelevant by doing strength training and thinking about how you feel. And it's like a byproduct to lose the weight. But it is important to know, like, how does our gut health affect our metabolism? How does it affect our ability to lose weight when we're putting so much effort into looking and feeling good? How are they kind of connected, and how can we improve it?
Yeah. Great question. So, one thing I'd like to do is step back and look at one of the key tip-offs that occurred over the course of microbiome research that had scientists go, holy cow, right? And that is this study that was done that looked at mice. And what it did is it had two groups of mice. It had one group of mice with microbes, with the microbiome, and then another group of mice that were basically created germ-free. They didn't have a microbiome. Now, the group of mice with the microbiome were further divided into obese mice and non-obese mice, right? Normal weight mice. So they took those two different groups of the mice with the microbiome, and they did what's called a fecal transplant. It is just what it sounds like. They took the poop from the mice with the microbiome and put it in the other mice without the microbiome, right? And so what they saw was actually that when the microbes from the obese mice were transplanted into these other mice, they gained weight more readily. They ultimately became obese themselves. And on the flip side, with the lean mice, when they took their microbiome and did a stool transplant into the other mice, that didn't happen. Right. So it really was like a big aha moment in science. And so people started to get really curious about this and started to look at, okay, well, is this true in human beings? Right. And some of the things that they found along the way is that, first of all, there are some bacteria that are better at extracting calories than others. So what that means is certain bacteria will fundamentally lead to increased absorption of calories. So your net caloric intake is up, all things the same, right? So that's number one. And while calories they're not the only thing that affects the scale, they are part of the equation. So that's one thing they learned. Another thing is that our microbiome, the types of bacteria that are in our microbiome, impact our hunger hormones and our satiety hormones. In particular, our hunger hormone ghrelin and our satiety hormone leptin. And so, when there's an imbalance, when our when the optimal bacteria are not present, that is one of the ways that it can impact the scale. It actually the microbiome itself affects our insulin sensitivity. So insulin is a hormone that does a lot of different things in our body. But one of the things it does when produced in excess, especially, is pushes our body towards calorie conservation, also known as fat storage, right? So more insulin means your body's going to store fuel and not burn it. And so when there's a compromise, or what we would call decreased insulin sensitivity, it means your cells aren't getting the message of insulin. So what does your body do? It just produces more. So your bacteria play a role in that, situation as well. The other thing that can happen is when there's a disruption of the microbiome, your body can get into a chronic loop of inflammation. So, inflammation is designed to be produced in short-term situations to help the body healing. But when it's produced chronically or long-term, it has really damaging effects. Well, one of the things that it will do is it will also cue your body to store fuel. Where that comes from is actually quite intelligent, because if you think about, the purpose of inflammation is to allow for healing if someone is sick or injured. Well, hundreds or thousands of years ago, if someone was out hunting or gathering and they were injured and no one was around and they struggled to get back home, well, they better be able to conserve their fuel for a few days until they can find food again, right? So it's an intelligent biological construct. It's just, in this day and age, not typically needed as it was before. But that chronic increase in inflammation is one of the ways it can impact our weight and metabolism as well. Lastly, I kind of mentioned this before, was the impact on our microbiome and neurotransmitters. So whether it's around promoting cravings, definitely one of the ways that our microbiome can tap into, increased consumption of foods is really just tapping the gas on the cravings pedal. The other way it can, similarly impact our cravings is through certain microbes, yeast in particular, will kind of hijack the brain and have this kind of feed me impact, right? Almost causing a intensification of cravings around foods that will allow them to thrive, such as sugars and simple carbs. So, what's so interesting, Brooke and Andrea, is, when I do these assessments with people and we get this information back, it's like people are often relieved. It's like, it's not you, it's your microbes, right? And it really is. And then we can get to work and kind of do some remodeling of the microbiome.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for breaking it down.
Mm-hmm.
It is so helpful. I mean, for me, I'm like to everyone, it all comes back to the microbiome. It all comes back. But if you're not having the digestive issues, it's important to know, okay, maybe your other symptoms though are related to your gut, your anxiety, your depression. For me, I would go in and I'd be like, I'm so anxious. I feel depressed. I have no energy. This isn't me. And it wasn't until I got a GI map test that they were like, yeah, you're right. You're not crazy. It is the microbes in your gut. It is the yeast and the parasites. And I'm like, yes, thank you. So your type of medicine, functional medicine, is really what I say saved me and gave me a whole new outlook. It also is very expensive. And I want to know, for the people listening who are like, okay, this is great. What steps can I start taking? Maybe I'm not ready to invest in a practitioner or in a test. What are some things you recommend that anyone can start doing today that is going to help kind of recalibrate that gut and that microbiome?
Yeah, great question, Brooke. So where I would start is by, looking at what helps nourish a microbiome that has a positive health impact and what is harmful to good microbes. Those are kind of the two places we could dance. And for all of you listeners out there, I know Andrea, Brooke, and I are all in the same camp when we say we encourage you to start where you are, right? Like give up any notion of perfection or bust. Like that's just not reality, and it's a paradigm that doesn't serve anyone well. So this is to say, I'm going to give you some places where you might start. And my encouragement is just to pick one or two, right? Don't create a laundry list that is overwhelming and is just, just not really practical to begin with out of the gate, right? Just one foot in front of the other. That is how any of us get anywhere. So on this front, what helps nourish a healthy microbiome? Well, foods high in fiber absolutely help nourish a healthy microbiome. This could be things like oatmeal or chia seeds or beans or legumes or, like an organic bean pasta. All of these things are examples of foods that are going to help feed a healthy microbiome. You could also look at, well, of these good bugs, right? How could I get some of them into my microbiome, right? How it's like seeding, right? I just kind of talked about the fertilizing well first, but seeding, you could look at consuming some fermented food, whether that's something like sauerkraut or a lower sugar kombucha, doing some miso. Those are some examples of some foods that will help, kind of seed and bring in the good microbes into your body. If you do well with a dairy, some people do totally fine with a Greek yogurt of sorts, then that would be another way you could bring in good microbes. Again, with that, you just want to be mindful of the sugar content there, because that leads us to what does harm, right? What does harm to the good bugs? Well, lots of sugar does harm to the good bugs. Alcohol does harm to the good bugs. Simple carbohydrates in excess, which, they don't taste sweet, but they actually have the same impact as higher sugar foods. So things like white rice or white potatoes or bread or pasta. And so you could kind of start with, as I kind of said these, I hope you listeners have, heard for yourself a few opportunities. And if we start on the side of what would be helpful for your microbiome, my invitation is to write down, like actually take note of just one step you'll begin taking in this week ahead, right? It might be, I'm going to make sure I get one high fiber food a day, or Monday through Friday, I'm going to make sure I have oatmeal in the morning, right? You get to say, but really just be clear for yourself, because part of that is you can then know when you're winning, right? You can say like, yeah, I did that. Awesome. Right. And then keep playing that game. And then on the other side, what's harmful to our microbiome, you could look at, okay, is it the sugar? Is it the alcohol? Is it the simple carbs? And if you're like, oh my gosh, it's all of the above. Okay, no worries. Just pick one. Just pick one. And you could start to look at, okay, what would be a better game? Maybe let's just take alcohol, for example. Maybe you pick a few days a week and you just say, okay, no alcohol Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If that's your next best step, awesome. I'm always going to cheer for a better game over a perfect game, right? Or maybe for you, you're maybe a little bit ahead of that and you might say, okay, I'm going to start being mindful. Maybe you're only drinking on Friday and Saturday, but you see that you're kind of creeping up to 3 or 4 drinks on those nights. Maybe you're going to bring down that alcohol ceiling. Okay, I'm going to try and honor 2 drinks a night on those days. Around sugar, it could be just starting to wrap your head around, like, what am I actually doing? So much of this work actually just begins with being willing to be kind and honest, right? Both equally important, being able to look up. I was working with a woman earlier today, and as we were doing this work of being kind and honest, I said, okay, let's look up how many grams of sugar were in your venti pumpkin latte, right? And she was like, oh my God, right? She was so cute. I was like, no. This is empowering. There's only one way we can shift this is just by looking at the facts, right? And so we get the facts and then we make some shifts.
Oh, that's such great. It's like mindset work with tangible tips to improve your health, which is so important. That's what people need because the tendency is overindulge or deprive yourself. It's this like back and forth. And so like for me, example, yesterday I had a follow-up with my hormone testing and my mind instantly is like, okay, I'm not going to drink for 6 months and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. It's like you can go off the deep end. And so I'm so curious like why you think our brain jumps to such extremes and kind of how you coach people to have more of that balanced approach. Like clearly I'm hearing some things of like small steps, but why do we do this and then constantly like fail and then try again?
Well, I really think it's because we have inherited a broken paradigm, right? Like the all or nothing paradigm, right? Overindulgence or deprivation. We did not make that up. We are definitely way too smart for that, right? But we did inherit it, right? So there was a time in our lives where we were kind of like mesmerized by it and just thought those were the options. Like, okay, great. Heads I lose, tails I lose, right? It's like overindulgence, deprivation, right? They're both a manifestation of self-aggression, in my opinion, right? So first of all, just seeing that is helpful. Seeing that you didn't make it up and yes, you did inherit it. And then, from there, how do we step into a new era where we begin moving from self-love? Well, when I work with people, one of the things we do together is we begin authoring that new narrative. And we begin in particular by having you author what I call your vision of vitality for your health and your life. And that really digs into your intention, right? If you time travel to the 5-year future and you envision what it would be like to be you thriving, right? To feel your best, to look your best and be your best, what would that be like? And I actually invite you listeners to do this exercise, right? You could press pause now, or if you're driving, come back to it later, right? But really give yourself 5 minutes with no distractions to write your 5-year future, right? And get into how it feels to be you, and maybe even what becomes available for you in your life in this new era where you are moving from self-love, right? Where, your health is almost just like a side effect of how you're caring for yourself.
I love that. I keep thinking about too, the idea of this is what's missing when you go to your doctor's office. and same thing with functional medicine. Honestly, when I would go to functional medicine appointments, I'd be like, okay, this is great, but I'm leaving extremely overwhelmed and I'm just paralyzed, and it's the all or nothing. So with my coaching, what I've transformed it to is, okay, the mindset work and the how do I fill the gap between, okay, here are all these answers of actually what's going on, but then how do you implement it into your life? Because it is so much mindset. And if you don't love yourself, right, this idea of the self-love and that work, why would you make choices that are going to make you feel good? It all comes down to, do I love myself enough to nourish myself and to choose the best choices? And they're not always easy. So it is such a mind game. I love that you're talking about this. Are there some other tools you use with your clients to help with kind of the mindset work game?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, when I work with people, I call them fulfillment exercises, but you could also just call them homework. And, you know, they really draw into a variety of aspects that I have found over time help people make shifts, right? Whether it is around gathering insights about how they're currently operating and their own unique, you know, mindset barriers, or whether it's around actually learning about their body. You know, to me, it's like when people start to learn more about their body, they're like, oh my gosh, this really is like this magical thing. You know, I want to take care of it because it's so amazing. Right. And so, you know, that's part of it. And, you know, in guiding people and coming up with strategies and also working with people in how they relate to failure, right? Like that word failure, it's like, oh gosh, it's so heavy and gross. Like, oh, right. But we all fail, especially if we're up to something big. You know, there's like a saying, if you're not failing, you're not playing big enough, right? So the thing that is, you know, really makes a difference is how we relate to those failures. Can we look at them and learn from them and then actually apply those learnings in our actions moving ahead? And so we do a lot of work like that, you know, and work with that. And I think about it like crossing the monkey bars of change, right? So if you're crossing the monkey bars enough, you're gonna fall off sometime. And the thing to do is to get yourself back on the monkey bars as soon as you can, and then also figure out why you fell off. Right? What can you learn from it? What can you do proactively to prevent from falling for the same reason? Right? Have a new reason to fall and then learn from that.
I love that. It's so much about like the morality tied to what we're doing. Like it's good or it's bad. I cheated. I failed. It's like, it's creating a new language around behavior change, a new language around, especially food. I feel like in our culture, it's especially people say like, I cheated. Saturdays I cheat. And it's like, how does that feel when you say you cheated? No, you didn't. You love pizza and it tasted great. And you don't have to feel bad about that. Maybe your stomach hurts, but like, that's okay. It's a choice you made and like, it's okay. And so I'm curious about that, like morality, especially with food and how you coach people on that.
Oh my gosh, so perfect. We are like three peas in a pod. So I actually, early in our conversations, we talk about this collapse between morality and food, right? And there actually is no good or bad, and you didn't cheat, and there's nothing you shouldn't eat, right? Because when we're on this path of collapsing morality with how we're eating or not, or how we're sleeping or not, or moving or not, right? It is a fast track to shame. And so far, I've not yet seen shame be super effective at causing evolution in this area of life. Maybe it's good in others, but not in this area, right? I don't know. But this area for sure, I do know it's not useful. So, you know, with that, we want to change our language, right? I do actually talk to people about changing your language because your language is both an expression of your view and a reinforcement of your view. And we're not just talking about standing in the mirror and saying, you know, something that you know is a complete lie. We're not talking about that. We're just finding new words that are true and aren't reinforcing a view that doesn't serve you, right? So you might be talking instead about good or bad food, it's like nutrient dense, or makes me feel good, or it's aligned with my intention, or, you know, there are a lot of different ways you could say it, but let's let go of the language that collapses morality with how we're fueling ourselves. And exactly like you said, Andrea, it is absolutely okay, you know, to make an educated choice. I'm going to have the pizza. I'm going to be bloated afterwards, and I'm going to love that pizza. Great, educated choice. Totally fine with that.
I love that. And that's the way I live my life too. I feel like it's more of like noticing, you know, like it's just noticing how things make you feel and then loving yourself enough to make a different choice most of the time.
Yeah.
And it's tricky because there's just so many delicious foods that are terrible for you. And so it is having some self-discipline in the midst of that of like, you know what? I've made this delicious choice a lot and I feel like crap all the time. It's affecting my mental health. It's affecting how I show up with energy. And so it's just dance. And I like how you said, it's like this dance.
Yeah. I think it's, You have to get to a point where it's not worth it anymore to continue making the choices you're making. Right? For me, I hear all of these, you should, you shouldn't, this is the best diet, tried it all. And what I always come back to is, how does this feel in my body? You can listen to all the podcasts, you can read all the books, but if you're not in the right, if it doesn't align with you, you have to match it. It has to work and fit for you. So for everyone listening, we provided so many great examples. Dr. H, beautiful tips, but what is actually speaking to you? What do you want to experiment with? That's, again, kind of auditing the words you're using, is it is all just one big experiment to find what's going to make you feel your best. And I believe when you view it from that lens, it's game over because you'll never look at it different. There isn't shame, there isn't blame. It's just being curious with yourself and loving yourself enough to experiment. Because for you to say it's black and it's white and I don't do this, like, life happens. So let's just let go of there is a perfect way, there is the way, there is not. But there are things you can do to make you feel better, choices you can make that make you feel worse. And we really want to keep empowering you to make those choices that make you feel good. And I think taking it outside of nutrition too can be really helpful, right? Talking about the mindset game. What are some other tools outside of nutrition that you recommend? Thinking about stress management and sleep and kind of tapping into those aspects of wellness.
Yeah, well, Brooke, with that sleep mention, that is where my head went first as you said that question, right? Because sleep is our body's superpower. And, I have to say for myself, for multiple decades, it was something that I was very arrogant about foregoing, right? Not only did I forego it regularly, I thought that it was like, wow, look at me, I can go without sleep until I couldn't, right? I actually felt like hell, total adrenal fatigue. And I started to learn more about the superpower that is sleep, right? So, of all the many places we could start, that is one, if sleep is a struggle for you, just like Brooke was saying, my encouragement is to go in there and start to look at where you could begin shifting this, right? Is your access to shifting your sleep quality, creating a social, an electronic curfew, right? And maybe right now you're in bed with it. And so you just start with 15 minutes before bed. Okay. There's ideal. And then there's where you start. So just start where you are again, right? There's, how your bedroom is set up for you to sleep. Is it dark enough, the right temperature for you? Just like Brooke was saying, I don't personally believe in it must be this degree on the wall. There's like the temperature that you feel good sleeping in, and that's what you want to do, right? So there are all these little things, but sleep is, there's so much we can say about sleep that, Matthew Walker, if you're someone who would like to dig into this topic further, he was he's a sleep scientist who's out of University of California, Berkeley, and he wrote a book called Why We Sleep. And if you Google him, you'll find a TED Talk, you can find it on YouTube with him, as well as a bunch of podcasts, but a great resource to start to get really wowed by all the things sleep can provide us with. The next thing is, looking at movement, right? Whether it's movement in the number of steps we're getting, just like general movement, or it's actual exercise. So when I work with people, it really is, okay, there are a lot of different points of leverage. Let's find the right one for you. Where's the best place for us to start for you, both in the sense of that it will produce outcomes and it actually seems feasible for you, right? But that movement is a huge one. In the way of rest and relaxation, I'm such a huge fan of the bookends of our day, like honoring rituals at the bookends of our day that let us slow down, right? And it doesn't need to be 30 minutes of meditation. If that's what you do and it feels great and it works for you, awesome. But, for those of you who see that would not be a great place for you to start, maybe you just start with 3 or 5 minutes in the morning, without your phone. You don't look at your phone until after you've brushed your teeth or something, right? And then you kind of build that up to a little bit longer, but really just finding that space in the morning to pause and think about your intention, to get connected. When I work with people, we use that morning time to ground in our vision of vitality for our health and our life. And then at the other end of the day, you can use that bookend in a lot of different ways. One of the ways I love how, when people do this is when they count their wins, they actually like write down what they want to acknowledge themselves for having accomplished or the way they've cared for themselves that day. And that can be, everything from I did my laundry because I didn't want to, right? But it was an act of like self-care, to I ate a salad instead of a cheeseburger, right? Or any variation of that. I had 2 pieces of pizza instead of 5. Okay, great. Just being in that habit of cultivating self-love through starting to see your good intentions manifesting in your actions.
Oh, beautiful. And if you follow Dr. H, Well Empowered on Instagram, every day there is a new tip. And I like what Brooke said. It was like, take what's speaking to you. And you were saying like, listen to different tips and just kind of experiment. And you're such a great follow because it's mental health, it's physical health, it's food, it's you have so much knowledge in your brain. I'm so happy you're putting it on Instagram. And so I feel like it's such a great place for people to start and where to find you. So can you let people know where they can find you, how they can follow you, or if they want to work with you, where they could go?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. On Instagram, you can find me at Well Empowered. And as Andrea said, we do our best to really have it be a place that provides value. And on my website at Well Empowered, if you are interested in exploring working together, please, schedule yourself with a complimentary consultation. Be sure you let me know where you found me because you will be gifted with 10% off if you do choose to work together. And then even on our website, you can sign up for our newsletter. I send out walk and talks, which are 3 to 5 minute little conversations a couple of times a month, and weekly dares. If you like cultivating micro habits, those weekly dares might be of interest to you. So those are different ways we can connect.
I love it. So many goodies. Doing the Lord's work, Dr. H. I love it.
Thanks so much.
Our next segment is our 3 gold stars. So you have given so much gold, but if you had to knock it down and break it down into just 3 takeaway items for people, what would you leave them with?
Yeah. The first is write your intended future, right? Actually sit down and write down, ideally pen to paper, because our brain is powerfully impacted by pen to paper versus fingers to keyboard. But however you're going to do it is fine. Ideally pen to paper, write down the 5-year future you intend. Number 2 is start to look at where your personal points of leverage are for making shifts, whether it's around nutrition or around sleep or movement or slowing down the pace of your life as a whole. Wherever that is, get clear on which area, or maybe you pick 2, that you really see is going to make the biggest difference and is a great place for you to start. And then number 3 is to begin to walk throughout your days with the question, what is my best game right now? What is my best game right now? And this is a question you could bring to yourself around your movement, or you could bring it to yourself around alcohol consumption, or you could bring it to yourself around sweets and desserts, really anywhere. So just beginning to start the practice of playing your personal best game in the moment.
Wow, those are great. I love it. All right, next is Unleashing Ivy. These are just questions that we're curious about, which I have mine if you want me to go first.
Yeah.
So my question has to do with the fact that I just got my hormones checked. I just got in so much information, so many tips, and just a little insight is that my estrogen's super high and progesterone's super high. And so I have steps, my next steps, and like what I'm going to do, some supplements, some lifestyle things. And I'm just curious about the mindset shift that you would kind of like help your clients with having patience during this process and observing yourself when you're going to see changes probably pretty slow. So how do you kind of coach people with like having patience with yourself and trying to find the good in the process of shifting all these habits?
Yeah, well, first, it really does start with being clear on why why this future outcome is important to you. What is, if you do the time traveling yourself, Andrea, and you look at just the other side of, shifting these hormones, you don't have to answer out loud, but you can kind of think for yourself, why is it compelling, right? These are just numbers on a page, but there's a reason you went to the effort to test your hormones, right? And spent the money, right? And so there's a reason you did that. And so there's some why that's there for you. So you just want to remember what that's for. And then, as I'm sure you can look in your rearview mirror and see evidence of little shifts over time adding up to like, wow, I feel like a whole new person than I did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it is. So just, having faith that this is that, right? You're just at the starting line of a different area, but you're going to move through it. You're going to make shifts. And over time, collectively, those even small shifts over time, there's synergy in them. And, keep in mind what that future experience is that you are moving towards.
Oh, I like the word synergy.
I think you should write down your wins every day. Like Dr. D said, Dr. H, excuse me, what did I notice today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Take inventory. And then in a month, we can record a podcast hearing all about what you know.
Yes,
I like it.
I love that.
Thank you for that. I love that answer. That's going to help me.
That was amazing. Okay, my question has to do with another topic that I know everyone listening can relate to. So similar to hormones is energy. For me, energy has been a huge issue just over my healing journey. And right now, I am trying to wean off caffeine and really notice, like, where's the natural energy? When I think about my 5-year self, I have natural energy. I rely very heavily on caffeine, and I know it's not good for my gut. It's not good for my hormones, based on the evidence that for me, what's true for me. So when it comes to gaining that natural energy and kind of weaning off caffeine, what advice do you have?
Okay, cool. Well, a few different things. One is high quality sleep, right? Sufficient high quality sleep for sure. Other things include, getting outside earlier in the day, even in dark days, because exposure to the natural light, sunlight, even on a clouded day, does kick in our production of cortisol in a healthy way, right? Cortisol, sometimes we think about cortisol as our stress hormone, a primary stress hormone. And that primary stress hormone cortisol it's a Goldilocks thing, right? It's not good. It's not bad. We just want it in its sweet spot, right? So when we get outside and we get exposed to sunlight, it starts to bring down our melatonin and bring up our cortisol in a healthy way. So that's one thing. Other things that I would say is really looking for your small pops of joy in life, whether it's you made some beautiful vegetables last night that you're going to have for lunch. And this experience when you sit, I don't know how it is for you guys, but when I have leftovers and I'm going to have them for lunch, it feels to me like my fairy godmother handled this for me. Like I forget that I did this, right? Every day I'm like, oh my God, that was so nice of her, right? But really experience the gratitude for this goodness. And, that could be one thing, but it also could be being with your, friends or be, if you have a pet, or seeing the natural beauty, right? But just really kind of leaning into little places of delight and awe throughout your day that enliven and ignite your spirit. Other things that I would say is, and you probably already have, make sure your nutrients are in tip-top shape, right? So when it comes to energy, I'm thinking about B12, I'm thinking about CoQ10, I'm thinking about omegas, vitamin D. These are all numbers that we can know. Magnesium, zinc, right? There's so many nutrients that play a role in our natural energy levels. So making sure those are all in their sweet spot is definitely important. And, if you haven't had your adrenals checked, which I imagine you have, that would be something else worth tapping into. It sounds like you're well on your journey though with that part. So yeah.
Wow,
Thank you.
Awesome.
So helpful. I love it.
Lots of tips in there. And our last question we love to ask, if you could go back to younger Jessie and tell her something, what age would she be and what would you tell her?
Oh my goodness. Oh, it's so funny because I think about that, and in so many ways, it's like even the years, like for me, my weight was like I rode the weight loss roller coaster for, 14 years or so, and it was not fun, right? I don't, like it was up and down, and I felt great when I was a weight I wanted to be, and I didn't feel great when I wasn't. And even when I felt great when I was a weight I wanted to be, it wasn't born of self-love, right? It was like deprivation. So it wasn't great no matter what the situation. But in many ways, I know I wouldn't be here without that, right? It really was for me, in my kind of mid 20s that I drew a line in the sand and I was like, oh my gosh, like my life is not going down like this, right? My life is supposed to be about a lot more than this. And so it was through that kind of aha that I vowed to author a new path forward, and ultimately, got tooled up with graduate degrees and certifications to be able to do this work. So, gosh, I don't know. I guess maybe it would just be telling younger me, like, it's going to be okay. You're going to figure this out. Right. I think that would be what I would tell myself.
I love
Trust
that.
the path.
Yeah.
That's what I hear you say. Yeah.
I love those little stories too of like when people know they went through something, but it has purpose. I mean, all of those dips have purpose. And I'm so happy that you shared that along with a million tips. I'm so happy we know you, we're plugged in with you, that our listeners can follow you. We just appreciate your time so much. We're so happy that we met you.
Well, thank you both. You guys are doing awesome work, and it's been such a pleasure being with you guys. And I know all of the work you're bringing to your audience is really a gift. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, Dr. Edge, we leave our listeners with a piece of gold, a quote that speaks to you. Would you please send off our listeners with your quote?
You got it. What we call failure is not the falling down, but the staying down.
This is Gold Ivy signing off.
Listen to your truth and go chase your gold.
Yay!
Oh, I love that quote. Wow.
Oh, that was such a good episode.
That was amazing.